What really attracted you to the ownership side of things? What was your sort of entrance to that world?
What's attractive about ownership of certainly commercial real estate is it's one of the greatest wealth building strategies available in America. It's great to start a company and to have an exit. That's a fun thing to do. But real estate is very, very accessible to lots of people. There are a couple of steps to get there. I wouldn't advise people run out and over lever. Real estate is a lot like fire. You know, fire used in your fireplace is a nice thing. It'll keep you warm, keep you happy. It'll make a very pleasant evening. But fire poorly used will obviously be destructive. And the same thing is true about commercial real estate as it's funded by debt. Debt is just like fire. It can be a very nice thing to improve your yield, to allow you to expand your wealth, and to allow you to buy a product using the bank's money. And you get all the tax benefits to yourself. But obviously, there are downsides to debt and being smart about it. I started through partnerships and through sponsored deals, which I personally believe is the right way, is partnering with experts and becoming a limited partner, and then expanded to my own transactions where I was a general partner. But for most people who are developing an expertise, or maybe they have another job, in my opinion, starting with an established sponsor and investing as much as you can as a limited partner allows you to get your money to work, allows you to have the tax benefits, and allows you to learn from a sponsor.
Obviously, you've got a ton of experience having been in the business for so long. Is there a particular asset class that you identified first, or was it really people you trust in the partnership saying, hey, I think this is the deal? Or were both of those things true?
Well, I think it probably is both. It's certainly an asset class that I understand. For example, I have a lot of friends that are in medical office buildings, and that they do wonderful and they make a lot of money and good for them. It's not an asset class that I really understand. Data centers, same thing. It's a wonderful asset class for people that understand it. So I want to understand the product and understand the drivers, because in my opinion, in order to avoid making a mistake, you really have to understand how decision makers make decisions about the real estate. But looking at a sponsor and asking the hard questions and talking about any losses that they've had or failures that they've had, and finding someone that you can trust, checking references. I mean, just doing the basics is really important. I have been in deals that have gone bad, and I've had sponsors that have shut down on me and been non-communicative, and it is a painful, sleep-losing kind of experience that'll make you really pay attention before you go into partnership with the next sponsor. So both are important.
You mentioned the hard questions. What are some of the questions that an inexperienced commercial real estate investor should ask?
Well, I think starting with how they're getting their capital, and it may seem counterintuitive, but why would a sponsor who is established talk to an inexperienced investor? Because most sponsors don't want to do a daycare. They want people who are sophisticated. And, you know, as a sponsor, one of the biggest problems is people who are unsophisticated who want to call, you know, every week, how's my investment doing? How's my investment doing? And people who are writing a check for much more of their net worth than they should. I believe that the best kind of limited partner is someone who's writing a check for 1 or 2 or 3% of their net worth into any individual deal. Because if you're investing, goodness gracious, 20% of your net worth in a deal, of course you're going to be worried. So you're going to have to understand what the sponsor's motives are, who are the lenders, and who are other people who've invested with the sponsor. I want to understand their capital stack. I want to understand their reporting structure. What kind of technology are they using? And to the extent that there is a question, short of me texting you or calling you, you know, is there someone in the organization that can answer minor questions so I don't have to track down the decision maker? I want to understand how they're identifying opportunities and how they're structuring those deals and structuring the debt. And then I'm going to ask someone directly, have you had failures? And it doesn't make you a bad person if you have, but how did you deal with it? Just really trying to understand their motive and how they recover from a bad situation, because I'm not going to say everyone has failures, but very few people have, bat 1,000 in real estate.
You mentioned technology. How have you seen the ownership of commercial real estate change? I mean, reporting, certainly we've got, concepts like Juniper Square. What are you leveraging to make your properties more successful and your partnerships more successful?
Well, a lot of that depends on the product type. And I believe just like you would look at debt in a measured way, you would look at technology in a measured way. I've observed some people try to over apply technology. And there are some great reporting tools, for example, to understand how brokers are doing in terms of tracking inquiries and tracking showing space. And without calling those out, they're great if you have a portfolio of a certain size, but you can attempt to apply too much technology to too small of an asset. So you have to use some common sense. But I'll tell you, OTSO is a wonderful creation. You have created something that's really great in the market. It allows us to get out of the security deposit business. I love the fact that you guys are going to do the credit check and give me some additional confirmation about the veracity of a tenant. And it helps the tenant in the sense of not having to tie up cash. And a lot of my tenants are small businesses who are entrepreneurs who are great people. I love them. I love their success. But if they don't have to tie up $1 in cash in a security deposit that isn't making me any money, that's a real win-win. And they're paying for the privilege of not putting up their hard-earned cash, which is really just a security idea. And we haven't had any negative events, but in the event we do, it makes my life really easy if that occurs. So that's a great technology that we're excited about.
You mentioned some of the third-party roles as being an owner, but for third-party purposes, it seems like having a property manager and having a broker, not only helps you, offload the decision-making, but helps you attract tenancy, helps you manage the day-to-day.
A good paradigm to think about is when you own a home. And I did this when I initially bought a home as a young man. Of course, I'd cut my grass because I would save the $50 to get the grass cut. And by the way, when I was a young broker, I would go to a lot of broker events for a free pork sandwich and a chance to win a TV. That was very exciting. Until one day, somebody explained the 2080 principle. And it goes like this. There are 2,080 working hours in a year. And if you're in an environment where you're earning money through real estate or you're earning money as a service provider, it's hard to establish the value of your time. But let's just go through an exercise and say that you work at a shop and you want to earn $500,000 a year net to you. Well, the math, if you've got 2,080 working hours in a year, and I'm leaving 2 weeks of vacation in there because most people work more than 40 hours a week today, then that's $482 an hour. But let's say you got a split with the shop, and let's say you have the noble goal of actually making $1 million a year of income on a personal basis, which would be a terrific goal for most anyone. Mm-hmm. Well, let's just round up and say your time is worth $1,000 an hour to do whatever it is you do, whatever you are best at, whether it's sales or production, coding, whatever it is you're doing in this type of environment. So now let's go back to cutting your grass or to the broker event. You might get a free pork sandwich and a chance to win a TV, but it costs you $1,000 an hour. And the same is true in the management of commercial real estate. There are people who are very good and have expertise in terms of property management or leasing. I'm delighted to pay those people whatever the fair market rate is so that I can focus on the thing that I do best and attempt that noble goal of a high income approach. And the idea of saving $50 by cutting your own grass, that's a strategy if that's what you want to do. My strategy is to delegate and outsource as much as possible.
We're almost a year into this COVID stuff. We're coming up on sort of 11 months here. From an ownership perspective, what are some of the things that you've learned in the past 12 months? As an owner, what are some lessons to take from really, what we all consider to be a pretty serious black swan event?
Well, fundamentally, the relationship with the lender is just so critical. Being honest, doing what you say you're going to do, and establishing that trust in the advance of a black swan event, as you call it, or any kind of negative event. And I think really understanding your commitments in terms of, for example, a debt service coverage ratio or other covenants that are in the small type that people tend to sort of skirt over. I don't know if that means you need to hire an attorney, but it certainly means that when you're entering into a debt obligation that you're serious about it and understand it. I take my lenders to lunch, or we go to lunch. I don't care who buys. And every other month, we're having a conversation and just catching up. And lenders are people too. And they have enormous power. They make decisions based on relationships and on the perceived strength of the borrower. And I learned a long time ago, people who, for example, in an accounts receivable sort of situation. If you hide from the problem, it only becomes worse. And so what happened to me in real life when COVID hit and cities began to shut down, we realized there would be a very dramatic impact on some of our tenants. And so we rang up the lender and had a conversation, and we said, we're fine now. We're going to meet our covenants, and we are going to do whatever it takes to survive. We are not going into forbearance. We're not going into default. If we have to put our own cash in the deal, we will. But let's be smart about this and work the problem together. And the lender was magnificent. There was something I've never experienced before. A lender in a particular case froze the debt for 90 days with no penalty, no forbearance, no amortization.
Wow.
And that allowed us great liquidity in the property. I think the second part of that is being sensitive to the tenants and those who are ogres and just running around trying to collect rent without being sensitive to business people are probably making a gray problem black and white, in the sense that our tenants are business people too. So offering reasonable approaches in terms of rent collection can make some sense. But I'll tell you what a lot of landlords learned during COVID is that it was reported in the paper and everybody raised their hand and said, hey, free rent, hey, deferred rent. But if you make people go through a simple process of even filling out an application and determining, or making the business case, I should say, of why they should get some type of favorable treatment on rent, actually, a lot of people fall out because they don't want to go through the process. And really, they were just reading the newspaper and asking for a freebie. So being judicious in the use of deferred or delayed rent is smart. Just put your head on.